Hi, everybody, and welcome to Exegetically Speaking, a podcast of the friends and faculty of Wheaton College, Wheaton, Illinois, and the Lanier Theological Library in Houston, Texas. My name is David Capes, and I am the Senior Research Fellow at the Lanier Theological Library and a former dean up there in Wheaton at the School of Biblical and Theological Studies. Our purpose in these podcasts is really very simple. We want to promote the study of biblical languages, Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, so we can read the Bible more faithfully, study it more fully, and not just read it, but to live it. Joining me today on Exegetically Speaking is Dr. Stephen Ortiz. He's the director of the Lanier Center for Archaeology at Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee. He's also a professor of archaeology there. Dr. Ortiz, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me on.
I appreciate it so much. Well, this is about biblical languages. How did you get started reading biblical languages?
When first started reading the Bible, and I realized the Bible is in a cultural context, and I was really interested in the history and the backgrounds. And so I moved to Israel to study archaeology. Well, to study archaeology, if you're doing biblical archaeology, you have to know the Bible. So I started learning Hebrew in Israel.
So was that modern Hebrew or was that
Both.
Both.
There's biblical Hebrew and modern Hebrew.
Modern Hebrew.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're very similar, aren't they?
Very similar, yes.
Yeah, we got new vocabulary for things like
yes,
encyclopedia,
yes.
things like
Yeah.
that. I remember finding that downstairs. I was cataloging a book. I looked at this Hebrew word and I said, "Gosh, I can't figure out what that means. I don't know what the root is." And then I sounded it out, and it was encyclopedia.
Yes.
So anyway, those kind of things, are the modern words, I suppose. So you started in Israel learning Hebrew. Along the way, did you learn Greek as well?
No.
So you've been more on the Old Testament side.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, if you want to learn Greek, let me know. We'll
yes.
work on that. We'll work on that.
I know people who know Greek.
Yeah. So as an archaeologist, how do you use your biblical languages? I mean, you've learned them, you work in them. How do you use them in your work?
Well, archaeology is studying the past, it's history, and I'm doing the history of the Southern Levant. There aren't many texts about the Southern Levant, so you have to study hieroglyphics, Egyptology. Assyria marched through, but naturally our core text is the biblical text. So if I want to flesh out the dirt, the pottery that I'm finding, you still need a text. And it's the biblical text. So all my students have to study Hebrew, or they study Greek or Latin if they're in the later periods. Because that's how it's the marriage of the material culture and the texts that we're able to rebuild or reconstruct ancient society.
So when you're talking about the land that is now Israel, the most probably important text is the Bible itself.
Right.
But there are other texts. You've got Ugaritic texts that have been discovered, cuneiform texts, and other things as well. And it's helpful to have experts in all of those languages around you to whom you can turn when you're studying.
Yeah. And naturally, sometimes archaeologists are very fortunate. We do find something with writing on it. We do find some type of text. And we have to be cognizant of, we have to at least identify the language, identify it's a text. But normally we specialize. So you have somebody who does pottery, you have somebody who does the epigraphy.
Epigraphy means what?
Study of the writing stuff. Yeah.
And the writings themselves would be on things like pottery, like stone, things that would last a long time, right?
Correct, yeah.
Right. So for example, the Dead Sea Scrolls, amazing archaeological find. That writing is on vellum or animal skin, a lot of that. Some of it was on copper, as I remember. Some really interesting stuff. But it's material that lasts for a long, long, long time.
Yes.
So when you're studying in Egypt, and you have some work going on in Egypt, the language of that is hieroglyphics.
Yes. And so we do have one project. We have an Egyptologist working at the Karnak Temple, and we're actually doing the Merneptah inscription. Now, the account of Merneptah's battle, that's at Karnak Temple. The Merneptah inscription is already a stela that's in the Cairo Museum, and that's been analyzed. But what we're looking at is on these temples, every great pharaoh recorded their great battles.
Part of their history is there. Yeah.
And so we're illustrating that. It would have been nice if the Judean kings on the temples would write, some of these
Would have
things,
done that.
but we have the text themselves. So that's why.
How common was writing in those days? In other words, could
That's
most
the
people
$1,000,000
read?
question.
We don't know that, do we?
You have both sides that say it wasn't until the 8th century, 7th century. That's where we have an explosion of text in the archaeological record, writing. But we have other earlier. Look, already in the late Bronze Age, we have scribes. We have the Akkadian. There was letters going back and forth between Egypt. And one of the greatest inventions was the alphabet. Cuneiform's like 660-something characters.
Yeah.
Imagine in kindergarten, it'll take you 10 years to get kindergarten to learn the alphabet.
Right. Yeah. How long would that song be? A, B, C, D, E, F, G? How long would the song be?
So most scripts are 10 to 30 symbols. What English is 26 letters, Hebrew's 22.
Right.
That's easy to learn. That's why I say it's one of the greatest inventions. And sometime 13th century, 12th century, alphabet was invented. You have debates whether it's Phoenicians or Egypt, but that allowed everybody to learn it. A lot of things we find in the archaeological record are abecedaries.
Are what now? Say that again.
abecedaries.
Oh.
ABC. So it's
abecedaries.
yeah.
Okay.
So they're school texts or people practicing writing the script.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And so this is where the debate comes. It's like, well, if people are practicing the script, how far down?
Right.
Were schoolboys learning this? Was it just scribes? Was it soldiers? At Lachish, we have letters from soldiers writing back. Sometimes we'll find something. This is Joe's water, Yosef, or Joe. It's just like, well, who would be writing?
Right.
We have to assume somebody can read this. If somebody's writing this,
Somebody's writing it.
Right.
Somebody can read it.
And anyways, we both sides. I go back and forth. Sometimes I say enough people could read. Sometimes I say there was just the elite.
Yeah.
But
And as you move through the biblical story, more and more people can write, more and more people can read. By the time we get to the New Testament, there are still debates about what percentage of the population could read, could write, and what literacy does mean in that. So we have a lot more work to do. So you and I have got a lot of work to do, my friend. Yeah. Well, thanks for being with us today on Exegetically Speaking to talk about how biblical languages have informed your work.
thank you for having me.
Thanks to Ian Rosine, Rebecca Larson, and Silvio Vasquez, who helped us produce this podcast. Thanks as well to John Lansma, our Wheaton-based director, who makes this podcast possible. We're grateful to Phil Keggy for our music. If you want to study biblical languages, then you need to consider Wheaton College. Whether you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, we have amazing programs, a first-rate faculty, and some of the best students in the world. So go to the website, www.wheaton.edu, and look for modern and classical languages. Get started today. If you have questions about this or any of our podcasts, we'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions or questions about any passage in the Hebrew Bible or Greek New Testament, send us an email and we'll see if we can get one of our experts to weigh in on that for you. Our email is exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. That's exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. Thanks for listening.